Sometimes life feels heavier than it should, not because of what's happening around us, but because of what's happening within us. There's a quiet struggle we all go through, the noise in our heads, the endless worries, the stress of things we cannot control. And what's even more exhausting is that we often believe we have to carry all of this alone. But thousands of years ago, long before the noise of modern life, the Buddha shared something deeply powerful, a way to live with clarity, peace, and unshakable strength, not by escaping life's challenges, but by transforming the way we face them. You see, Buddha didn't promise a life without problems. He promised wisdom that would change our relationship with those problems. He taught that true transformation doesn't begin outside of us. It begins right here, in the mind, in the heart, and in the small choices we make every single day. And that's exactly what today's video is about. Because right now, in this very moment, you already hold the key to changing your life, not through force, not through perfection, but through understanding these 12 life-changing principles from Buddha's timeless wisdom. Principles that, when practiced, can bring immediate peace, clarity, and balance into your daily life, no matter what you're going through. This isn't just another video full of advice. It's a guide to a way of living that has helped millions of people for centuries. And I truly believe, if you stay with me till the end, without skipping any part, you're going to walk away with something valuable, something that might just stay with you for the rest of your life. And if what we're building here speaks to your heart, if you feel this space of reflection and Buddhist wisdom is helping you, there's a simple, free favor I'll ask from you. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps us grow this mindful community and reach more beautiful souls like you who are searching for peace and wisdom in this noisy world. So, let's walk this path together, with open hearts, curious minds, and the gentle guidance of Buddha's teachings leading the way. There's a strange thing about life. Most of us are either living in the past or worrying about the future. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you caught yourself replaying an old memory, wondering what you could have done differently, or feeling anxious about something that hasn't even happened yet? It's almost like we're so busy mentally traveling back and forth in time that we forget to fully live the only moment that actually exists, this one right here, right now. Buddha understood this deeply. He saw how the human mind was constantly running, chasing desires, holding on to regrets, worrying about what's next. And he taught something incredibly powerful, that real peace, real happiness, doesn't live in the past or the future. It lives in the present moment. In fact, one of the Buddha's most famous teachings was simple yet life-changing. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. Now that sounds beautiful in theory, but let's be honest, living in the present is not always easy. Our minds have been trained for years to wander. But that's exactly why this principle from Buddhism is so transformational. It's not about forcing the mind to stay still. It's about gently guiding it back again and again, like a kind friend reminding us where life is actually happening. When we live in the past, we often carry unnecessary pain, regret, guilt, sadness. These emotions linger because our minds refuse to let go of what has already happened. But here's the thing, the past cannot be changed. No amount of overthinking can rewrite it. Buddha's wisdom shows us that clinging to the past is like carrying a heavy bag everywhere you go. It only weighs you down. He invites us to learn from our experiences, yes, but not to be trapped by them. And when we live in the future, we often feel overwhelmed. Anxiety shows up because the future is uncertain, it's unknown. Buddha taught that craving for future outcomes, for things to happen exactly as we want them to, creates suffering. It's like reaching for clouds with your bare hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. But what happens when you return to the present moment? Everything changes. Suddenly, life feels lighter, your mind becomes clearer, and you begin to notice things you were missing all along. the sound of your breath, the warmth of sunlight, the smile of a loved one, the simple joy of being alive. Living in the present doesn't mean you stop planning or dreaming. It simply means you stop missing your life while you wait for something better to happen. It means fully tasting your food instead of eating on autopilot. It means really listening when someone speaks instead of thinking about what you'll say next. It means noticing the small wonders all around you, because they've been there all along, waiting for your attention. This is why mindfulness is such a central practice in Buddhism. Mindfulness is the art of coming home to yourself, not lost in yesterday, not anxious about tomorrow, but awake to this very moment. And like any skill, it gets easier with practice. Buddha didn't expect perfection from anyone. He simply encouraged us to begin, to pause, to breathe, and to return over and over again to where life is actually happening, here and now. You know, one of the hardest things for us as human beings to accept is that nothing stays the same forever. We hold on so tightly to things, relationships, situations, even our own version of how life should be, almost as if we can freeze time and keep everything exactly the way we want. But life doesn't work like that. The Buddha understood this deeply. In fact, he taught that the root of much of our suffering comes from this very habit, our resistance to change, and our refusal to accept the natural flow of life. Think about it for a moment. Everything you have right now, your health, your youth, your loved ones, even your emotions, all of it is temporary. Everything is moving, shifting, transforming. And yet, how often do we suffer simply because we're trying to hold on to what cannot stay? It's like standing in a flowing river, trying to grab the water and keep it in your hands. No matter how hard you grip, it slips right through your fingers. The Buddha called this reality anicca, the truth of impermanence. But here's what's beautiful about this teaching. Impermanence isn't just about loss or endings. It's also about possibilities, about renewal, and about hope. Because if nothing stays the same forever, then neither do our difficult moments, neither do our struggles, neither does pain. It means that every difficult phase in your life is temporary. It means that every wound can heal, every storm will pass, and every heartache will eventually soften. The Buddha often shared that understanding impermanence is not meant to make us fearful. It's meant to make us wise. Because when you see life clearly, as it really is, you begin to live differently. You love people more deeply because you know they won't always be here. You appreciate the small moments because you understand they are precious and fleeting. You let go of petty arguments faster because what's the point of wasting time in anger when life is already so short? It's also incredibly freeing. So much of our anxiety comes from clinging to the past, clinging to expectations, clinging to control. But when you truly accept impermanence, something shifts inside you. You stop resisting change and start flowing with it. You become softer, lighter, more peaceful. You start to hold everything in your life with open hands, not tight fists. Buddhism reminds us that even we ourselves are always changing. You are not the same person you were a year ago. Your thoughts have evolved. Your heart has been shaped by experiences. Your body has shifted with time. And this is natural, this is life. To deny this is to fight against the very nature of existence. In fact, the Buddha taught that impermanence is what makes growth possible. If nothing changed, nothing could ever improve. Without impermanence, a seed would never become a tree, a child would never become an adult, and you would never have the chance to leave behind old habits, old pain, or old limitations. Impermanence gives us space to grow, to heal, to transform. There's a quiet kind of suffering that often goes unnoticed in our lives. It doesn't show up with loud noise or dramatic moments. It creeps in slowly, almost silently. It happens when we hold on too tightly, to people, to things, to expectations, to moments we wish could last forever. And when life, in its natural way, begins to change or move on, we feel pain, we feel disappointment, we feel lost. But here's the truth. Buddha saw this pattern long ago, and he taught something incredibly freeing. Much of our suffering doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from how tightly we hold on. Buddha often spoke about attachment not as love or care, but as clinging, as that desperate grasping that says, I need this to stay exactly as it is for me to be happy. And yet, life is never still. Everything in this world, every person, every feeling, every situation, is in constant motion. The seasons change, people grow, circumstances shift. Our own thoughts and emotions rise and fall like waves in the ocean. But when we resist this natural flow, when we demand permanence from a world that is forever changing, we create our own suffering. Think about it for a moment. How many times have we said, if only this stayed the same, then I would be happy? Or, I'll never let this go because I can't imagine life without it. Whether it's a relationship, a job, a status, or even an image we have of ourselves, we become attached. And this attachment turns into fear. Fear of losing, fear of change, fear of letting go. But Buddha, with such simple clarity, showed us a different way. He reminded us that freedom isn't found in holding on tighter. It's found in learning to loosen our grip, to appreciate things deeply while they're here, but to also understand that their nature is to change, and that's not something to fear. It's the way life breathes. This doesn't mean we stop loving or caring. In fact, it means we love even more purely, because when love is not about possession or control, it becomes about presence, about truly being with someone or something while they are here, rather than living in constant fear of their absence. This is the beauty of non-attachment in Buddhism. It's not cold or distant, it's spacious. It gives room for things and people to be what they naturally are, free, changing, alive. Letting go of attachment doesn't mean giving up everything and living like a monk on a mountain. Unless, of course, that's the life you choose. What it does mean is practicing a gentle shift in our hearts. It means catching ourselves when we start to cling too tightly. It means noticing when our happiness is becoming dependent on things outside of us staying exactly the same. Buddha taught that everything arises and passes away. The flowers bloom and then they wither. The sun rises and then it sets. Even our own bodies and thoughts are constantly changing. This isn't something to grieve, it's something to marvel at. It's a reminder to be present, to love fully now, to appreciate deeply now, because now is all we truly have. And the beautiful thing is, the more we practice letting go of attachment, the lighter we feel. Life becomes less of a battle against change and more of a dance with it. We start to experience joy not because life is perfect or permanent, but because we're no longer afraid of its natural flow. There's something quietly powerful about the way we feel when someone shows us genuine kindness. It softens us, it disarms us. It reminds us that even in a world that can sometimes feel cold or distant, there are still moments of connection that feel warm and deeply human. But what's truly beautiful is what the Buddha taught us about kindness, that compassion isn't just something we give to others when it's convenient or easy. It's a way of living, a practice, a reflection of who we are at our very core. When the Buddha spoke about compassion, or karuna in Pali, he wasn't talking about a grand heroic act done once in a while. He was pointing us toward a way of seeing the world, a way of understanding that every single person we meet is carrying invisible struggles, silent fears, and deep wounds we may never see on the surface. And once we realize that, once we stop seeing others only through the lens of their actions or words, and instead through the lens of their humanity, everything changes. The Buddha often reminded his followers that all beings want the same thing, to be free from suffering and to find happiness. Whether it's a stranger on the street, a friend who hurt us, or even someone who seems impossible to love, at the heart of their actions is often the same longing we have inside us: to be at peace, to be seen, to feel safe. Let's be honest, compassion isn't always easy. It's simple to feel kind toward people who are kind to us. The real challenge begins when we feel misunderstood, disrespected, or hurt. And yet, this is exactly where the practice of compassion becomes most powerful. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." And what he meant is deeply practical. When we meet anger with anger, or cruelty with cruelty, all we do is fuel a fire that burns both us and the other person. But when we meet harshness with softness, judgment with understanding, and conflict with patience, we're breaking that cycle. We're planting seeds of peace, even in places where it feels impossible to grow. And compassion isn't only for others. Buddhism teaches us that true compassion begins within. Too many of us are kind to everyone except ourselves. We speak words of encouragement to friends, but speak words of criticism to our own hearts. The Buddha taught that we should hold ourselves with the same gentleness we offer to a child or a dear friend, especially when we fall, fail, or struggle. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, carries a ripple effect: a smile, a listening ear, a silent prayer for someone's peace. These moments may feel tiny, but they are powerful acts of resistance against a world that often rushes past pain or hides from vulnerability. Here's the most beautiful part. The more compassion we practice, the more it transforms us. We begin to move through life with softer eyes. We stop needing to win every argument. We stop seeing people as problems to fix, and instead, we begin to see souls just like ours, trying to figure life out the best way they can. The Buddha showed us that a compassionate heart isn't weak. It's incredibly strong. It has the courage to stay open even when it hurts. It has the wisdom to understand that everyone is fighting a battle we may never fully see. And it has the grace to love, not because people always deserve it, but because that's the kind of world we want to help create. There's a strange thing that happens to us as we move through life. We keep searching for answers outside of us. We look to others for advice, for solutions, for the next big thing that will fix all our problems. But Buddha's wisdom gently reminds us, the answers we're looking for have always been within us. They've just been waiting for us to slow down, to pay attention, and to really listen. And this is where wisdom begins. Not in collecting more information, but in deeply understanding ourselves and the nature of life itself. Buddha often said, "Just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame." Isn't that beautiful? It tells us that wisdom is not about being the smartest person in the room or knowing everything about the world. True wisdom is about stability. It's about clarity. It's about seeing life for what it really is, without being blinded by emotions, assumptions, or distractions. And the most powerful part? This kind of wisdom is available to every single one of us, no matter who we are or where we come from. In Buddhism, wisdom is called panya, and it's considered one of the most precious qualities a person can develop. But it doesn't just drop into our lap. It's cultivated slowly, intentionally, like tending a garden. And the tools we use to grow this wisdom are beautifully simple: reflection, mindfulness, and learning to observe life without clinging or resistance. You see, most of us are reacting to life on autopilot. Something happens. We react without thinking. Someone says something hurtful. We get angry without pause. We face a challenge. We spiral into fear without question. But Buddha's path invites us to step back from this automatic way of living. He invites us to look at life with what's called right view, one of the steps in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view means seeing clearly. It means understanding that life is constantly changing, that suffering arises from attachment, and that peace comes from letting go. Think about how this applies to everyday life. How often do we get upset because we expect people or situations to be different from what they are? We expect perfection from imperfect people. We expect happiness from temporary things. And when reality doesn't meet these expectations, we suffer. But wisdom allows us to look at life differently. It helps us see, this is how life works. Nothing stays the same. Everything arises and passes away. That simple shift changes everything. Wisdom doesn't make life easier by removing all difficulties, but it makes us calmer, steadier, and far less disturbed by the ups and downs of life. We begin to act not from impulse but from understanding. Another beautiful teaching from Buddha is the importance of self-inquiry, asking ourselves the deeper questions. Questions like, is this thought helping me or harming me? Is this action leading me closer to peace or pulling me away from it? What is the true nature of this experience? These are the kinds of reflections that grow wisdom. They help us pause. They help us choose wisely rather than react blindly. Wisdom in Buddhism is not cold or distant either. It's deeply connected to compassion. In fact, wisdom and compassion are seen as two wings of the same bird. One cannot fly without the other. Because when we see life clearly, when we truly understand our own suffering and the suffering of others, kindness naturally flows from us. There's a reason why so many people today feel restless, impatient, and frustrated. We live in a world that moves fast, where everything is about instant results, quick fixes, and immediate rewards. But if you've ever tried to grow a plant, heal from pain, or build real inner peace, you know one thing for sure. Life doesn't work like that. The most valuable things in life take time. And in Buddhism, this truth is deeply respected. Buddha himself taught that real transformation, whether of the mind or heart, comes slowly, gently, and with great patience. One of the greatest lessons from Buddha's life is not just about enlightenment, but about the patience it took to get there. He didn't wake up one day free from suffering. He walked a long and often difficult path. He sat in silence under the Bodhi tree, facing every distraction, every doubt, every fear, not for minutes or hours, but for days. That kind of patience wasn't a weakness. It was incredible strength. Because anyone can react quickly, anyone can rush, but it takes real inner power to pause, to breathe, and to trust the slow unfolding of life. Patience in Buddhism is not about simply waiting. It's about how we wait. It's about the quality of our mind while we wait. Are we waiting with anger, with anxiety, with restlessness? Or are we waiting with acceptance, with calm, with faith in the process? Buddha taught that impatience is often a form of suffering we create for ourselves. It's a resistance to the reality of the present moment. And the more we resist, the more we suffer. Think about your own life. How many times have you been frustrated because things didn't happen on your timeline? Maybe it was waiting for success, waiting for someone to change, waiting for clarity or peace or love. But the truth is, life unfolds at its own pace, not ours. And every time we fight that, we drain our energy. Buddha reminded us that everything in life is impermanent, and that includes the difficult moments. But to really experience peace, we need patience to sit with those moments without needing them to end right away. In Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful word, khanti. It means patience, endurance, and forbearance, but it's not about gritting your teeth and suffering silently. It's about having a heart that is spacious enough to hold discomfort without breaking. It's about being gentle with yourself when progress feels slow. It's about understanding that growth is rarely loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's so quiet you can barely notice it, like a seed slowly breaking open underground. And that patience also extends to how we treat others. Buddha often spoke about being patient with people, not because they always deserve it, but because impatience with others only disturbs our own peace. He encouraged us to respond to anger with calm, to meet frustration with kindness, and to remember that every person is on their own journey, moving through their own struggles. Patience with others is ultimately patience with life itself. But here's the most important part. We also need patience with ourselves. This might be the hardest of all. We live in a world that praises speed, achievement, and perfection. But Buddha taught that the path of growth is not straight. It's full of detours, mistakes, and setbacks. And that's okay. The lotus flower, such a powerful symbol in Buddhism, doesn't bloom overnight. It rises slowly from the muddy waters, 1 inch at a time, moving through darkness before reaching the light. There's a strange thing about life. We often spend so much energy trying to fix what's outside of us, while quietly ignoring what's happening within us. We chase success, we chase comfort, we chase approval, and yet, deep down, we know none of these things truly bring us lasting peace. Why is it that even when life looks perfect on the outside, something can still feel empty inside? Buddha understood this so deeply. He realized that real peace, real happiness, and real fulfillment never come from what we collect or how the world sees us. They come from the way we live, the way we act, and the values we carry every single day. Buddhism is not about forcing yourself to follow rules or living like a monk in a cave. It's about something much simpler, but far more powerful: living ethically, living with integrity, living in a way that feels clean, honest, and kind both to yourself and to others. And what's beautiful is that this is not about perfection. Buddha never asked for that. He asked for awareness. He asked us to become mindful of our choices, because our choices shape the direction of our lives far more than luck or circumstances ever will. Think about it for a second. When was the last time you felt deeply proud of yourself, not because of what you achieved, but because of how you handled a situation? Maybe it was being kind when you could have been rude. Maybe it was telling the truth when a lie would have been easier. Maybe it was choosing patience over anger or understanding over judgment. These moments may seem small, but they hold enormous power. They remind us that we are not just reacting to life, we are consciously shaping it. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful teaching called the 5 Precepts. These are not commandments or punishments. They're simple guidelines for ethical living. Steps we take not because someone forces us to, but because they lead to peace in our hearts and harmony in our lives. These precepts include not harming living beings, not taking what isn't freely given, being mindful and respectful in relationships, avoiding false speech, and staying away from things that cloud the mind. These are not about restriction, they're about freedom. The freedom that comes when you can look at your life and feel at peace with your actions. And this matters because our actions don't just affect others, they affect our own mind. Buddha taught that every unkind word, every dishonest act, every selfish moment, it leaves a mark, not on the world, but within us. It creates restlessness, it creates guilt, it creates suffering. And in the same way, every act of kindness, generosity, and honesty plants seeds of peace and joy that blossom quietly inside us over time. Living ethically also means paying attention to the little things: how we treat people when nobody's watching, how we speak when there's nothing to gain, how we act when it would be so easy to take shortcuts. It's these moments that shape our character. Buddha often reminded his followers that it's not grand gestures that create a beautiful life, but small, consistent acts of goodness done every day. What's amazing is that this kind of living naturally attracts better things into your life: better relationships, deeper respect, inner confidence. Because when your actions come from a place of integrity, you become unshakable. You're not worried about being exposed or caught. You don't live with regret. You move through life with lightness because your heart is clear. There's something very quiet, very powerful about the way we earn our living. Most of us don't really think about it too deeply. We go to work, we do what needs to be done, we pay the bills, and then we move on with life. But if you pause for a moment and look closely, you'll realize that the way you earn your daily bread doesn't just fill your pockets. It shapes your mind, your energy, and even your peace of heart. And Buddha knew this very well. In fact, when Buddha spoke about the path to a peaceful life, he included something called right livelihood, part of the Noble Eightfold Path. Not because he wanted to complicate life, but because he understood that how we earn our living leaves invisible fingerprints on our soul. The work we do, day after day, hour after hour, slowly becomes a part of us. And if that work goes against our values, if it harms others, or if it pulls us away from who we really are, then no amount of money or success can fill the emptiness that comes with it. You see, the Buddha never said that everyone must quit their jobs and go live in the forest. In fact, he taught householders, everyday people like you and me, to live mindfully within the world. And one of the most beautiful lessons he shared was this, that our livelihood should never bring harm to others. That means earning in ways that are honest, peaceful, and kind. It means not dealing in things that destroy life or create suffering. It means that if our success is built on someone else's pain, it's not really success at all. But this teaching goes even deeper, because Buddha also reminded us that our work is not just about avoiding harm. It's about doing good. It's about creating value, about serving in ways that uplift not just ourselves, but the people around us. And when you approach your work with this mindset, something magical happens. Even the simplest job becomes meaningful. Even ordinary tasks become part of your spiritual journey. Think about it like this. If your work involves kindness, if it involves helping, building, healing, teaching, creating beauty, or bringing comfort to others, then you're not just working, you're practicing right livelihood. And that brings a kind of quiet joy, a sense of inner respect, because you know deep down, your hands are clean, your heart is clear, and your energy is honest. Now let's be real, not everyone has the luxury of choosing their dream job right away. Buddha understood that too. It's not always about what you do. Sometimes it's about how you do it. Are you showing up with integrity? Are you treating others with respect? Are you giving your best without cutting corners or causing harm? Because those little choices, they add up. They shape your karma. They shape who you become. And over time, as your life evolves, Buddha's teaching encourages you to look for ways to align your outer work with your inner values. It might not happen overnight, but every small step matters. Maybe it's choosing honesty over profit. Maybe it's speaking up for what's right. Maybe it's turning down an opportunity that feels wrong, even if it pays well. These choices strengthen your inner self far more than money ever could. There's a moment in life when you start realizing it's not always the big battles that drain your energy. It's often the little things, the words left unsaid, the words were said carelessly, the tiny misunderstandings, the unnecessary arguments. And at the center of all of this is one simple thing we often overlook, the way we speak. Buddha once said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." And when you really sit with this teaching, you begin to see your words aren't just sounds, they are seeds. What you say, how you say it, and when you say it. These small choices can either plant harmony or plant conflict. In Buddhism, mindful speech is considered one of the most important parts of living a peaceful life. It's part of the Noble Eightfold Path, a practical guide Buddha shared for anyone seeking clarity and wisdom. And mindful speech isn't about being silent all the time. It's about speaking in a way that does not harm, but heals. Speaking not to impress, but to connect. Speaking not to win, but to understand. Buddha called it right speech. And if you look closely, it's not just about avoiding harsh words. It's about creating a space where truth, kindness, and understanding live side by side. But let's be honest, most of us weren't really taught this growing up. We were taught how to talk, but not always how to speak mindfully. And so, we fall into habits. Gossip, complaining, speaking just to fill silence, criticizing without care, or even saying things we don't fully mean just to escape awkward moments. And while these may feel harmless at the time, over days, months, and years, these habits start shaping not only our relationships, but also our inner world. Buddha encouraged his followers to ask themselves 4 simple questions before speaking. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it the right time? These questions act like gentle filters, not to silence us, but to refine us. They help us pause and reflect before letting words leave our mouths, because words once spoken can't be taken back. They can heal wounds or create them. Think about your own life. How many times have words spoken in anger lingered far longer than they should? How many times have careless comments created distance between people who love each other? And how many times has a simple kind word lifted you out of sadness? This is the power of speech Buddha wanted us to awaken to. The power not just to express, but to connect deeply and honestly. And mindful speech isn't just about talking to others, it's also about how we speak to ourselves. Buddhism teaches that the inner dialogue, the way we speak silently within our minds, can shape our emotions, our decisions, and even our self-worth. If we speak harshly to ourselves, constantly criticizing or doubting, we create inner suffering. But if we speak gently, with patience and understanding, we build inner peace. The Buddha reminded us that compassion must begin with ourselves. If we cannot speak to our own hearts with kindness, how can we offer that kindness to anyone else? Practicing mindful speech doesn't mean you'll get it perfect every time. It's a practice, a journey of becoming more aware, more intentional. It might mean catching yourself before complaining unnecessarily. It might mean pausing before gossiping about someone's life. It might mean choosing silence over words that serve no purpose. And sometimes it means using your voice courageously, to speak truth with love, to set boundaries with kindness, or to uplift someone who's struggling quietly. There's something truly powerful about a still and focused mind, but in today's world, that's often the hardest thing to achieve. We wake up already bombarded by noise, messages, notifications, worries about the day ahead. Our thoughts scatter in every direction before our feet even touch the ground. And slowly, without even realizing it, we start living on autopilot, reacting instead of responding, stressing instead of thinking clearly, overthinking instead of simply being present. Buddha understood this struggle long before smartphones or social media existed. He knew the real challenge was never out there in the world. The real challenge was always within the mind. Buddha taught that the mind is like a wild monkey, jumping from thought to thought, restless, distracted, often creating suffering that doesn't even exist in reality. But here's the beautiful part. He didn't say we should hate the monkey mind or fight against it aggressively. Instead, he taught us to train it with kindness, patience, and gentle discipline. He showed us that mental discipline is not about force. It's about loving attention. It's about learning to guide your mind like a wise and compassionate teacher guides a curious child. In Buddhism, training the mind is considered one of the most important practices because everything, our peace, our decisions, our happiness, flows from the mind. If the mind is scattered, life feels scattered. But if the mind is steady and clear, life feels easier, calmer, and far more meaningful. And this is where mental discipline comes in. It's the art of choosing what thoughts you water and which ones you gently let go. But let's be honest, disciplining the mind is not an overnight thing. Even Buddha's own journey involved years of practice and patience. Mental discipline starts small, really small. It could be as simple as noticing when your thoughts start running away with anxiety or negativity, and instead of following them blindly, you pause, you breathe, you bring yourself back to the present moment, maybe to the feeling of your feet on the floor, maybe to the sound of your own breath. In that simple act of coming back, you've already begun practicing discipline. Buddha often spoke about the power of right effort, and right effort doesn't mean exhausting yourself trying to be perfect. It means being consistent, being mindful, and understanding that even the smallest act of attention is powerful. It's not about controlling every thought. That's impossible. It's about changing your relationship with your thoughts, knowing when to engage, when to release, and when to simply observe. You might wonder, what happens when we actually practice mental discipline every day? Slowly but surely, we begin to respond to life instead of react to it. We stop being pushed around by every little thought or feeling that pops into our head. We learn to pause before we speak, before we act, before we make choices that could lead to regret. Buddha once said, "Whatever a monk keeps pursuing with his thinking and pondering, that becomes the inclination of his awareness." And this is true for all of us. What we think about, we strengthen. What we focus on, we become. This is why Buddhist monks spend years practicing meditation, not to escape life, but to fully engage with life with clarity and compassion. And you don't have to live in a monastery to experience this peace. You can bring that discipline into your daily life, when you're stuck in traffic, when someone says something hurtful, when your mind starts spiraling into worry. That's your moment of practice. That's your chance to be the master of your mind, not its slave. There's a reason why some people, even in the simplest moments, look so genuinely at peace. It's not because their life is perfect. It's not because everything always goes their way. It's because they've learned a very quiet but powerful secret, the art of being content with less. The Buddha once said, "Contentment is the greatest wealth." And when you really think about it, that couldn't be more true. In a world where we are constantly taught to want more, chase more, and collect more, it's almost revolutionary to find peace in what we already have. Most of us don't even notice how deeply conditioned we are to believe that happiness is somewhere outside of us, in the next thing we buy, the next goal we achieve, or the next person we meet. But the teachings of Buddha gently remind us that this constant chasing often leads us further away from peace, not closer to it. Because the more we chase, the more restless we become. And the more we crave, the more dissatisfied we feel with the life that's already in front of us. True joy, according to Buddha, isn't about filling our lives with more things. It's about freeing ourselves from the endless hunger for more. It's about learning to see the beauty in simplicity. And this doesn't mean we can't dream big or have goals. It simply means we stop tying our happiness to things that can easily disappear or lose their shine. Think about it like this. When was the last time you felt completely at ease just sitting quietly, doing nothing? Or genuinely happy with a small moment, like a warm cup of tea, the sound of rain, or a kind word from a friend? Those moments, those tiny ordinary moments, are the heart of real happiness. But we miss them because our minds are always racing towards the next thing. This is why so many Buddhist monks live such simple lives, not because they can't have more, but because they have discovered the freedom that comes with needing less. They show us that when you clear away the clutter, not just physical clutter, but mental and emotional clutter too, life feels lighter, your mind feels clearer, and your heart has more space for what truly matters. The Buddha also warned us about the danger of attachment, not just to things, but to ideas, expectations, and even identities. We tell ourselves, "I'll be happy when I have this," or "I'll finally feel good enough when I achieve that." But what happens when those things don't come, or when they do come but the feeling doesn't last? That's when suffering begins, because we've placed our peace outside of ourselves, in things that change, fade, or disappear. But when we shift our mindset, when we practice gratitude for what we already have, when we appreciate simplicity, and when we stop believing that more automatically means better, everything changes. We start to feel rich in a completely different way, rich in presence, rich in peace, rich in gratitude. You know, one of the most surprising things in life is how rarely we actually pause to look at ourselves. Really look. We spend so much of our time moving from one thing to the next, dealing with responsibilities, chasing goals, handling problems, that we forget to ask a simple but powerful question: how am I living? Not in the sense of whether life looks good from the outside, but whether it feels right on the inside. This is something the Buddha often pointed to, the importance of turning inward, of being mindful not just of what's happening around us, but of what's happening within us. The Buddha once said, "What we think, we become." And if that's true, if our thoughts, habits, and actions are shaping our future, doesn't it make sense to stop every once in a while and see if we're moving in the direction we truly want? Reflection isn't about guilt or regret. It's about awareness. It's about living consciously instead of drifting unconsciously. And that's why regular reflection is such an essential practice in Buddhism. It helps us step out of autopilot and come back to the life we're actually living. Think about how easy it is to lose track of what really matters. We get so caught up in our routines that days blur into weeks and weeks into months, and suddenly we look back and wonder, where did all that time go? Buddha was very clear about this. Time is precious. Life is impermanent. None of us know how long we have. And so one of the greatest kindnesses we can offer ourselves is to pause regularly and ask, am I living in alignment with my values? Am I becoming the person I truly want to be? This doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need hours of meditation or a perfect routine. It can start with a few gentle questions at the end of each day. What did I do well today? Where did I struggle? Did I act with kindness? Was I patient? Did I get caught in anger or fear? And most importantly, what can I learn from all of this? Reflection in the Buddhist way is never about beating yourself up. It's about learning, it's about growing, it's about moving forward with more clarity and more compassion, both for yourself and for others. The beauty of this practice is that it keeps us connected to what's real. It stops us from living someone else's life, following someone else's expectations, or losing ourselves in distractions. Buddha taught that wisdom doesn't come from avoiding life, it comes from paying attention to life. And reflection is how we pay attention. It's how we notice the small shifts in our behavior, the subtle changes in our mindset, and the quiet wisdom that life is always trying to teach us. And here's the thing, regular reflection isn't just about correcting mistakes. It's also about recognizing progress. Sometimes we forget how far we've come because we're always focused on what's next. But every small act of patience, every moment of kindness, every time you choose peace over anger, that deserves to be seen and honored. Buddha's path was never about perfection. It was always about presence, about sincerity, about effort. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want you to remember something deeply important. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be present. Every small effort you make to live with awareness, every gentle choice to return to kindness, patience, and reflection, it all matters. It all shapes the person you are becoming. The Buddha didn't teach us to rush through life chasing outcomes. He taught us to walk slowly with intention, with heart, and with wisdom. If today's message spoke to your soul, there's another video waiting for you right here on the screen. A continuation of this journey, filled with more Buddhist wisdom to guide you through life's challenges with peace and clarity. I hope you'll take a moment to watch it. Thank you for being here, for sharing this space, and for being a part of Buddhist journey. Your presence truly means more than words can say. Keep walking gently, keep reflecting deeply, and keep choosing the path that brings you closer to your truest self. Until we meet again, may you be peaceful, may you be happy, and may you always walk in wisdom.